All right. All right. So thanks, folks, for joining us today. I want to share a little bit about my role with Rachel's Table and why I'm interested in this topic, and Lisa will do the same. I also want to say that the idea for having this conversation in this way came about because over the course of a few coffee chats, there kept being a lot of chat side conversation about measures of success, about definitions, about community, about the impacts of gleaning. And I personally felt like I wanted to have some concerted conversations about that. And there were other folks who enthusiastically said, yeah, that would be great. So there have been several of those types of conversations going on with the SARE grant through AGO, looking at impacts of gleaning on climate and environment. And this group of Lisa, myself, Charlotte from Kukua Harvest, and Sarah Bluestein from Rachel's Table, one of my colleagues, we got together a month or two ago to kind of dig more into this conversation and some of the questions that were alive for us. And we wanted to bring those questions to a larger group of people to see where this conversation goes, and see what might be useful at the symposium and beyond, for us to keep kind of dialing in on some of these questions together that we'll frame today and then open up discussion around. So Rachel's Table of Western Massachusetts is a nonprofit that in many ways has been around for 33 years and in other ways has been around for just about a year and a half. We became our own nonprofit a year and a half ago, and prior to then we were a program of another organization. We do several kinds of food access work, one of which is gleaning. We do open community gleans and also private group gleans. And Sarah and I work together to really grow this program. We've been growing it a lot over the last couple of years and seeing some pretty deep impacts in terms of community partnerships and networks developing that we're interested in exploring more. I do a lot of the fundraising for this program, and I'm interested in both what impact we're having at a community level and how to share that impact in creative ways that move people. Last year at the symposium, I presented on story maps, which is a geographic information system's visual way of mapping impact and reach of gleaning. And I'm curious about other ways of articulating and sharing what it is that these programs are accomplishing, that traditional metrics and ways of presenting information don't necessarily capture. What I'm not interested in is pandering to funders. A key idea from the workshop on community-centric fundraising at the AGO Symposium 2 years ago that stuck with me is the question of how can we work together to essentially teach or train funders to understand impact differently. That when we are doing that as a network, as a movement, it educates them about something. And so what are we maybe trying to educate them about, and how can we collectively do that more effectively? I also think about what the role of quantitative versus qualitative data is. And while I think traditional funding often gives too much credence to quantitative data, I also wonder if there are ways we can frame numbers or gather different numbers. What else could we be looking for that can be measured in numbers that could help to tell our stories in meaningful ways? So those are some of the questions and contexts in which I'm coming to this conversation. And I will kick it to Lisa to introduce herself.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, everybody. I'm Lisa. I'm the program manager for Kukua Harvest. We're an island-wide gleaning program here on Hawaii Island, like Kathy said. We're actually a program of a larger organization called the Food Basket. The Food Basket is the only food bank on the island. And as such, we have many different food access and nutrition programs for our community. One of them, of course, is our gleaning program. Kara and I kind of talked about this. I think we were one of those side conversations she mentioned before. We talked about this during another AGO coffee chat, I think, and I think it really resonated with us. And I also do a lot of the fundraising specific to the gleaning program. And so, yeah, just kind of thinking about telling the story, and which is kind of like a trigger word for me, I think, because we never have enough characters. I ran into this yesterday. There's never enough characters to like really tell your story. There's always like some kind of character limit, and it drives me nuts. But I think like gleaning just like touches on so many aspects of the food system, and we do an injustice. Like our program talks a lot about like pounds harvested. I think it's really, I think when we first started, it was like really easy to like conceptualize, oh, we just did 500 pounds. But now we're in like the hundreds of thousands of pounds. And it's like, I don't know what that looks like. I mean, for me, that looks like 5 years of work. Um, but what does that look like to our community? Like, I think it's an injustice to boil it all down to pounds harvested. So yeah, I got to talking to Kara about this, and it's like, how else can we share what we're doing, especially when we're talking to funders, but also when we're talking to our community? When we first started our gleaning program, which was about 5 years ago, it was like the word gleaning was synonymous with like ag theft. And so just like that education alone was like just that education alone was like, yeah, it took a lot of time and energy. And I was like, okay, well, if we can't call it gleaning because you think we're stealing everything and bragging about it. So yeah, like, so how are we going to talk about what we're doing? And I think this conversation that we're hoping to, I don't know, instigate today is really kind of expanding on that idea.
At one point, Lisa, my harvesting coordinator, decided that she would convert the pounds of fruit into the pounds of baby whales or baby seals. And she was doing social media posts equating the harvest to the number of baby animals that have big, dark eyes that people love to look into.
I've never thought to do that, but I'm kind of curious now, like how many whales does our harvesting?
So our visual design coordinator, she actually did that in one of our issues of something where it was like, we harvested or we moved this many pounds. We have a rescue program also, so it was like hundreds of thousand pounds, and she was like, which equals this many whales, or like it was like this many bowling balls, like one school bus, like and like 6 gray whales or like something like that. Yeah. So sorry, Lisa, did I cut you off at all? Or no, we're
Nope,
good?
all you.
Okay, cool. So we wanted to invite Sarah Bluestein, who's on this call from Rachel's Table, to share a story or two that demonstrates impact that kind of falls outside of these usual definitions or sort of confined metrics. And if Charlotte from Cocoa Harvest joins us, she'll also share a story or two. And then we have some kind of key questions that we'll open it up to discussion about, and I'll take notes. And we've kind of been taking notes on these calls already, so we're also approaching this as not just a chat one-off, but like as an ongoing conversation that we're gathering some information about and seeing where it takes us. So Sarah, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Kara. Yeah, one thing I'm thinking a lot about in our program, so this is our 2024 was our second year of growing our open community gleaning program. So that's a program where anyone can sign up to glean, and we did 46 gleans this year. So a lot of people joined our program in 2023. A lot of the same people stuck around for 2024, and the gleaning program has really grown in, I'd say, really exciting, unexpected ways. It is a lot more educational than I expected. People learn a lot about the crops they're harvesting. They learn about local agriculture and they connect with farms. There have just been a number of things that have happened that have been outside of our plans for the program in a really beautiful way, and a lot of really unexpected serendipitous connections. And I think one thing I'm thinking about how to present is just the network of connections that have grown out of people who've been connected to this gleaning program. And I wanted to share a few stories about that. One in particular is that one of our regular gleaners, his name's Mike, started gleaning with us in 2023. And initially, he wanted to see if we had any leftover produce that could support a pop-up food pantry that he was organizing at the community college he attends locally. So he came out to our glean, he gleaned with us, he brought back, I don't know, maybe a few hundred pounds of produce. He started coming regularly. He and the rest of the permaculture club that he was restarting at the community college ended up putting on several pop-up food pantries on campus, which were a huge success. It was really just kind of became this like community celebration event where people were seeing giant sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts on the stalk for the first time. So it was like exciting. Everything was free. Staff, students, and community all joined in. It was a really big success and really good publicity for the club. It was a great partnership with us. And then because of just Mike's various connections, at one of our gleans later in 2023, we had a lot of leftover daikon radish that agencies just didn't want. We gave away hundreds and hundreds of pounds, but we had been offered thousands of pounds of daikon radish and we didn't have a place for it. So Mike worked with the librarian from the community college and with another partner organization that organizes a free weekly community meal. And they put on a kimchi making workshop, which was, again, a really big success and just a really nice collaboration of people who had all been connected through doing local food justice work or through our gleaning program. But the connection I really want to highlight is this year, one of my other gleaners called me because her neighbor had a bunch of leftover radish. And she was like, I don't know where this could go. You know, it's too small to do a glean, but do you have any thoughts? And I suggested that she get in touch with Mike because of the kimchi workshop. And so easily, she called Mike, who she had met at a glean. Mike called the librarian who had taught the kimchi workshop and contacted the food, our local cafe that puts on these free community meals. And they were able to do a second kimchi workshop. And I'm just thinking a lot about the fact that all these connections were made just by virtue, or many of these connections were made by virtue of people just meeting as volunteer gleaners. And the fact that they could just so easily put on another community event that Rachel's Table didn't organize. We didn't do any logistics besides receiving one phone call and making one other quick phone call. But now all those people are connected. This workshop could happen so easily. It's just really beautiful to see all these different networks and how they've grown and the connections between nonprofits and just from regular volunteers. And I just think that's a huge strength of this program is that so many different ways and different times people have met and made a connection and helped to support each other's community events or put on a workshop that wouldn't have happened. And I think it's really awesome that so much of it is existing outside the scope of what Rachel's Table is. Like this isn't a Rachel's Table kimchi workshop, but you know, we're happy to connect people. Anyway, and I just think that's one of the biggest successes of the program. And I want to think about just how we share just this deepening of this community network. I think that's really special. And one other metric that I really have appreciated thinking about for this year in managing the open community gleaning program is we got a lot of requests for like one-off produce for events, like for an applesauce making workshop in the public schools or for I don't know, so many different ones. We probably got like 7 unique one-off requests and we were able to fulfill basically all of them or, you know, supporting a community harvest supper. And to me, that feels really important in the way I want to run the program is I just want it to be really responsive to community need. And ideally, we'd always be able to send produce wherever it's wanted. You know, it depends how everything goes and how many asks get and how we scale up. But I think this like responsiveness to community need in these one-off pop-up events has been really special to me. So I'm thinking about how to document that, how to share stories about that. Yeah, I think that's what I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. And I want to tag on one thing that Sarah mentioned, but I just want to highlight it also because it feels like a really meaningful piece to me is the education that Sarah was talking about, like the popular education of our gleaners coming out and learning more about local farms, local agriculture, and food systems. And we see through the conversations we have with them and their end of year gleaner feedback surveys that people are learning about what it takes to produce food. They are learning about their specific local farmers. They are learning about the land. They are learning about the systems of waste and the loops of generosity that underlie our food system. And that kind of popular education about food systems, food access, and local agriculture, especially in a landscape of changing climate, I think is pretty powerful and important. And cool that that's happening through this program.
So everybody may have noticed that we don't have any slides up. We're really hoping that as much as we can, this will be a discussion. We kind of joked about putting the chat in coffee chat. I think like we really want people to share today. Only share as much as you're comfortable sharing. Don't feel pressured to share. But we're hoping to just kind of, I guess, chat. If you have coffee, great. So we kind of have this kind of overarching question and then a couple of other questions that Kara's putting into the chat right now. But we just wanted to start with how can we as a gleaning movement discern and share the stories and impacts of your gleaning program beyond pounds harvested or even individual served? So I'll say that again. How can we as a gleaning movement discern and share the stories and impacts of your gleaning program beyond pounds harvested or even individuals served? And we can just kind of, the potential seems, oh, I read that as awkward at first, Thomas, and I was like, oh, please share more. But Skyward does make more sense. Yeah, so just, this is like super informal. You don't have to raise your hand, just chat. If there's more than one person speaking, I'll try and kind of regulate us so we're not overlapping people. But yeah, just if anybody has anything, or I can stop talking for a second for those who like to think in silence.
So real quick, I don't know everybody, and so having their state and their organization in the chat with their name would be helpful for me.
And also, when folks speak, if you would just share also your name, your organization, where you're located, pronouns if you wish, that would be nice for us to keep reinforcing that. Thanks, Barbara.
I can start as folks kind of think about that question. Like many years ago, AGO did, I think it was actually a coffee chat, and somebody had presented on like nutrition and measuring nutrition. And I haven't stopped thinking about it since. And I actually reached out to the presenter, who is no longer at the like in the position that they were when they presented with AGO. So I wasn't actually able to reach them, but this idea of like how much nutrition are we getting out into the community like really resonated with me. But I will say, when we surveyed our stakeholders, when we got the surveys back and we analyzed the data, a lot of people, we had a question that was like something about like how do you want to like show the impact of the organization or like the program or something like that. And we gave some answers, and then we also gave like other, and it was kind of like pounds harvested, how many different crops we're harvesting, how many different like places, unique places are we going to? And one of them was nutrition. And that was one of the lowest responses. And so while pounds harvested was actually the most voted for, it wasn't really a vote, but like had the most responses, the most answers. And so we kept going with that. But I think about that often. That like nutrition doesn't really resonate with our stakeholders, but it does resonate with me. Has anybody else had like done a similar survey or has been thinking about that for themselves, which is essentially what our question is asking?
So this doesn't answer exactly, but at one point, when the poundage seemed to be numbing to the minds of the people that we were hopefully inspiring, we shifted on and off with servings. So it looked up USDA, and Betsy can tell me if this has changed. The servings, according to the USDA, is a half a pound of fruits or vegetables. And so we took our poundage and we doubled it and said, this is the number of servings that we're collecting, seeing that might spark a different thought process of the impact that we're having in the community. So that does not answer exactly what you were getting to, but one other approach other than baby seals.
This is Tom. Tom O'Donnell. I work at EPA. And by the way, hi Barb. It's been a while. It's so cool to see you. I can't tell you how excited I was. But I did some playing around. I do a lot of playing around things, and I played around with nutrition and on some gleaning work that was being done in Southeast Virginia, and I took some gleaning productions from Society of St. Andrew down there, one of their gleaning events, and I used the same website I think Barb was talking about, USDA, and I converted it into vitamins, that kind of an approach. And I just did it because I wanted to see if I could, and I found out I can. And then I was distracted onto something else. But the results of that was I got pretty positive feedback about that. And but here's the way I looked at the comment about the survey that was just discussed is, and I've done a little more, by the way, on the nutrition, vitamins and minerals in Arkansas and Atlanta. And that information touched, and Barbara, you mentioned this too, it touched a different group of people. I'm not surprised that a survey of an existing group of people would give consistent kind of similar results. And for example, nutrition low, pounds high to a group that's been using pounds to report on and not nutrition. That doesn't surprise me. But in terms of expanding the opportunities to integrate and influence a different set of people in the medical field, the vitamins and the minerals really get some attention. And I love the idea of meals served too. That's another way to increase numbers. So I would look at it not as a negative. I kind of like to root for the underdog. And the survey results told me the nutrients are the underdogs. But I know where nutrients are the super dogs. So it's just a matter of like, okay, where can I find the right audience to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish? And at the same time, help the other audience accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, because win-win works a lot better than win, not so much win. That makes sense. So I think it's a good idea to think about nutrition, particularly in, I'm reading a lot more about attention being focused on chronic diseases, and that boils down to not calories or pounds, but nutrition. So yeah, there's an audience out there. I would encourage people to, within their universe, play around with that a little bit more and see if you get a different set of feedbacks. Thanks.
Thomas, clarifying question. When you said that that framing of vitamins and nutrients got pretty positive feedback, I'm curious from who. You mentioned the medical field, but like, are you talking about like doctors as stakeholders or like
No, and
insurance companies?
this was the gleaning group I was working with. So they said, "Oh, I really like the direction it's taking," because this particular gleaning organization interacts with a lot of medical people. So it gave a vehicle, it gave a new thread of connect to medical fields. Now in Arkansas, there was some positivity about that with University of Arkansas working with Medicare and some health groups and gleaners on very specific positive outcomes of produce gleaning results and immediate health outcomes in people that were being tracked by University of Arkansas Medical Center, I think. So that's where nutrients are the big deal. So here's an example. Let's suppose you'd say, well, we gleaned enough food that was equivalent to a gray whale. Well, how about we gleaned enough food to provide vitamin A to kids equivalent to 10,000 pounds of sugary cereal, something like that. Sorry, I went on a little bit beyond what you asked me, Kara.
No, that's fine. Taking notes. Thank you.
I will say, as an island community, we talk a lot about how if the boats stop coming, we have X days of food on island. And so something for us and maybe for other more rural communities is like talking about how many days of food you've provided. That's come up a few times kind of like in the island kind of circle. So that was something I just wanted to share. Anybody else have any thoughts or any Lauren?
Hi.
Yeah,
I'm Lauren Beatty. I'm on here with Professor Dawn Brewer. We're both from University of Kentucky working on a new USDA SARE grant that we are lovingly calling Win-Win for Waste Not, Want Not. And the focus of our grant is obviously reducing food loss waste, but we are both registered dietitians and everything we do is with that nutrition angle. So even though we are just barely getting started, it is wonderful to hear that promoting nutrition in that way might be appealing to some audiences. And as we get started, we are gonna hopefully provide nutrition education as kind of like a carrot to get partners on board, like come on board and we as dietitians can come talk to you or educate your community or whatever that is. So we are just here to learn, truly, but it is great to hear that nutrition angle might be appealing to getting some partners on board.
Hey everyone, I'm Betsy. I'm with Food Forward in the LA area. I use she, her pronouns. And we have been thinking a lot over the years about how to better tell the story of what we do in our gleaning work besides pounds. And some of the things that we are now tracking or have started to track are volunteer, like number of volunteers, which I think a lot of people do, but also volunteer shifts. I know a lot of folks have a smaller group of volunteers that volunteer a lot. So that's like a cool way to not necessarily track the like 30 people in your network, but to track the 500 shifts that they have participated in. We also have tracked hours, kind of volunteer hours on and off, which for us is a little complicated in some ways, based on how our system tracks those things, but that's something that we have done. And then we also track and talk about the number of like community partners. So whether that's like our hunger relief organizations that are receiving the produce, or our fruit donors, like folks that have fruit trees in their yards that are donating. That's a really cool number. And, you know, we could talk about like the big picture of all of those people combined, volunteers, like farmers market vendors who donate to us, fruit donors, all that stuff. And I think that shows just the number of people that are involved in making this program run and contributing to this type of work, because there's so many people. And then I know our organization has been trying to do a better job of presenting our impact. And so I'm just looking at our website, and the things that we have listed are like dollars of social impact. I know not a whole lot about how they're calculating that number, but they have that listed. We have hunger relief partners, distribution sites, like where the food is actually being distributed, produce recovery donors, and then we have total metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions that have been prevented from entering the atmosphere by our gleaning work, and then millions of gallons of water prevented from going to waste each day. And that number was calculated using the Refed impact calculator. So yeah, just lots of different ideas that we're trying out.
And to also bring us back to Tom's point, just for a second, Kara, sorry. I'm hearing lots of different measurable impact that we can think about if we're applying to, and I think this point was made, but I really want to underline it. If we're applying to like Robert Wood Johnson grant, we would probably want to talk more about like nutrition and vitamins. And if we're applying to like a climate change grant, we might want to talk about water, prevention, water waste prevention, I should say. So just really wanted to underline that point. Go ahead, Kara.
When you said volunteers, it just, in the beginning, Betsy, it made me think of something else that's come up in our program, which is the mental health impacts and social health impacts for people who are coming out gleaning. Sarah had shared some of these stories with me of folks who said things to them like, you don't know how important this is for me. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to come out here. And that's someone who may or may not have been bringing food home with them. I don't know, like it might not have been about the food at all, but about the opportunity to be outside on a beautiful day, working with the land, working with their body, working with other people, building connection, not feeling isolated, et cetera, et cetera. And that's something, one of our gleaners actually introduced the idea of doing some academic research about the positive effects of gleaning on mental health for gleaners. So just curious about where that piece could go.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that for a second. In our end of year gleaning survey we sent out, especially the first year of our program, I feel like some of the biggest feedback we got was just like, you know, it ranged from, you know, you don't know how much this is meant for me, and just people's excitement and just deep appreciation to get to be in a program where it's an open community gleaning format, so people can sign up for as many gleans as they want to in a week. So sometimes in a busy part of the season, they're seeing the same people 3 or 4 times a week if they want to come out to that many gleans, and it becomes this, you know, strange, beautiful community of people who never would have met otherwise, and now have these reliable people they're going to see for an hour and a half at a time and get to catch up on their lives. And I think the community building aspect of it, and yeah, just people having a place that they knew they could come be in community with people they vaguely know, and also could say things to that maybe they wouldn't tell some other people who are close in their life. This kind of creation of this third space of these gleans that they can come meet up at was really impactful for people.
I think I'm Shara. I'm from the extension office in Port Angeles, Washington, and that got me thinking that it would be neat to survey the gleaners and the homeowners and ask them if they've formed any long-term friendships based on the program, because I know of several myself where, you know, they start, especially between gleaners and homeowners, and they start connecting outside of the gleaning program, and I think that's pretty cool. And especially as a lot of our homeowners are older people that maybe don't get out of their home too much, I think it's very meaningful to them. And I had another thought about when Thomas was talking about vitamins. I was thinking another neat way to talk about it would be to figure out for example, the vitamin A, like the how many children would receive their daily vitamin A requirement, like this 2 busloads of children from this harvest. I thought that would be kind of cool.
That would be. I have an add-on to that. I went into AI search here real quick, and I asked the question, what vitamins and minerals are thought to be beneficial to people with dementia and Alzheimer's. And you might know there was recent law was passed in support of Alzheimer's. There's a lot going on regarding that field of Alzheimer's. So I just, as an experiment, I just said, let me try this while you guys are talking, I'm listening. And I got some instant feedback. And it said that there is some evidence, no surprise, right, that certain vitamins and minerals are beneficial to people with brain health issues like Alzheimer's. And I got a list here. Vitamin E, omega-3s, vitamin D, antioxidants. So then I asked, well, what produce provides these specific vitamins? Because that relates to you guys. And it said leafy greens, legumes, whole grains, nuts and seeds, berries, citrus fruit, cruciferous vegetables, bell peppers. So, and then Sarah just made a comment about delivering clean produce to senior centers, which are a site of a lot of people with dementia. So they see the connection. If your program is addressing seniors and senior health, here's some information that could be very relatable to diseases that affect seniors. Easy to do. Provide that information, and you know, there you go.
Yesterday, our program, I just finished writing a grant. It was for our county, and they had a couple of different like categories. One of them was like food and nutrition access, and the other one was like community building and network strengthening. And we made a conscious decision to apply to that community building one. Charlotte, who isn't here, said like last year, and it's been just playing on repeat in my head. She's one of our harvest leaders, and last year she was like, you know, Lisa, when you hired me, I thought this was a food job. I thought it was a fruit job, and it turns out to be a people job. And I think that just really underlined the whole sort of all of it. And so I've been thinking a lot since she said that. It's just been living rent free up there. And I'm like, we need to make a conscious decision to strengthen that network, because that's what brings people out. We've seen it. Kara's seen it. Sarah's seen it. People just really love the program, and I thought they would love it because of the food. And it turns out most people are loving it because of the other people and that connection that they're building. And I had said many years ago, there was a mom and her 3 daughters, and they would come to every harvest they could. We call them harvest because of that ag thing. And I was like, how do I write a grant that like encompasses that? Like, how do I tell that story? And so I ask you all, how do we tell that story? Sheriff shared a really good one about Mike. How are we pitching that story of a mom and her 3 daughters are using it as bonding time before the eldest daughter goes off to school? You know, like, I don't know. I ask you.
I mean,
The
one
thought that
of,
comes to my mind is to look for a different sort of granting group than maybe you're accustomed to have looked at in the past. That focuses on community related activities. I'm sorry, go ahead, Kara.
no, that's fine. I mean, that's precisely what we are doing right now. There's a grant that we're working on that is very explicitly about partnerships, and more grants that I'm seeing out there are explicitly interested in partnerships. And it's kind of refreshing because this grant is not looking for new shiny things. They're looking for established work and programs that are deepening effectiveness through collaboration. And what Sarah and I have been sifting through is exactly that question, Lisa, of how do we tell that story in a way that is compelling? And I think with funders who like that's the story they want to hear, we need to do our job and tell it well, but it's an easier story to tell than a funder who's looking for a different story. And one of the lenses that I think is useful for us right now is a lens of resiliency and adaptiveness, because one of the things that we see in our area is, for example, the Healthy Incentives Program in Massachusetts is a program that allows people to use their SNAP benefits for healthy food and to get money put back on their SNAP account. And funding for that program was just cut by 75%, which is a bummer for people who rely on it to feed themselves and their families. It's a bummer for farmers, for whom that's a portion of their income, and a bummer for farmers who are on SNAP themselves. And then so with that as an anticipated food access issue in our area, we also have climate-induced agricultural catastrophes like intense flooding 2 summers ago, where some of our local farms lost 45 acres of crops and weren't able to plant in those fields until I don't even know what the process is for mediating from E. coli and whatever else flooded onto their fields. We got an intensely hard frost in May a couple of years ago. There were 0 peaches in all of Massachusetts. So when we have situations like that coming up, whether through governmental policies or available funding or climate, how can we, through these community partnerships, support resiliency and food access through being adaptable, nimble, responsive programs that understand where people are and can connect all those dots, and say, okay, you're not getting apples from the food bank because of X, Y, or Z. We've got apples from this farmer, and here's how we can get them to you. Yeah, I forget exactly where I started with your question, Lisa, but that's what it made me think of.
I have to chime in. I'm here because Barbara at the East Kashita Network here invited me. I joined the board recently, and my background is in adult education. Many decades actually working with adult learners, training them to be the advocates for our program, the voices for our programs that we're always getting defunded. Or cut funding from this various decision makers. And now I don't work for the college anymore. I work as a freelance trainer in storytelling, mostly digital storytelling. And a lot of the work I've been doing over the last year or 2 has been with public health people, tribal health people, because they are on this track of data storytelling, which like I didn't even know that term existed until a year or 2 ago. But back in the day when I was working with adult ed students and training them to be the spokespeople, the voices for adult ed, we figured out pretty quickly that data plus story is like a magic thing. I think y'all have been saying that ever since the meeting started. Like, it can't just be data and it can't just be stories. It has to be both. And the other thing I want to add is that, like, one thing I've seen to be true over many years in doing like advocacy and influencing decision makers, whether it's like funders or other leaders or decision makers, is they need to hear from the people most deeply and directly impacted by the decisions they make. So like, they didn't always want to hear from me. I was like a middle manager, coordinator, educator type, advocating for education. They were like, yeah, okay, whatever. But oh, I'll never forget that story that one student told me about riding his bike at night to those classes. Anyways, I feel like it's really exciting to think about you all collecting collecting the stories from the people that you have been quoting. Another thing we always say in our storytelling trainings is you better tell your story, because if you don't, somebody else will tell it for you. And I feel like that applies to you all as a group of associate or an association or whatever, collective of people doing gleaning all over the place. But it applies to the people that you work with too. Like, capture those stories. Like Amelia said, like, capture them and put them, like direct language and voices from the people that are experiencing these things. It's going to come through more authentically to the decision makers if it's coming directly from the people who you are telling their stories. They need to tell their stories. Okay, that's what I had to say.
She's an incredible coach and probably has tons of storytelling tips that she can share with us. She also served on the board of Odyssey Storytelling and is still very active.
That's what I do. That's why I put in the chat, I'm a story worker. That's what like Jen Nowicki Clark, one of my colleagues, and I call ourselves. I am super excited to be here because I care so much about everything that you just said. I feel like I didn't even know that this organization existed until, Barbara invited me to this meeting, but I would love to help. So I'll just stay in touch through Barbara somehow or another. Maybe I could help someday. Or if you ever want to know more about digital storytelling or storytelling in advocacy, not so much grant writing, but I think you can. I think the point that Amelia said was like, oh no, the stories are trapped in the grants. I think like stories need to be created and documented, either multimedia wise or podcast wise or otherwise, and then pull those stories into the grants instead of having them, just sit in the grant proposals.
You're saying we're doing it backwards? Thanks, Laura.
Kinda, maybe. I don't know. It's not that you're doing it, but I think y'all are doing exactly what you want me to do.
The grant, yeah. I think they get pulled into the grants and then they kind of stay there. So yeah, like we totally appreciate your perspective, Laura. Thank you.
Backwards.
Laura, I want to come to the symposium and do a workshop on storytelling.
Yes.
Awesome. I want to come to it.
I want, but funding, but like, and I live so far away, but I would love to be involved somehow or another in the work that you guys are doing. It's a new venue for me. Like I said, I've been working a lot with tribal health people who are like training their people, whether it's like health workers, like tribal health workers, tribal health leaders, tribal health folks in general, because they realize like we're not going to impact the health of our tribal members if we're not collecting the stories of how these programs are impacting them at a very personal level, those personal narratives. That's what I'm all about. So yeah, hit me up, talk to me anytime. I would love to talk more about it. I don't want to take more time on that right now, but thanks for getting my attention. I'm excited.
I'll reach out to you, Laura, with more information about the symposium. And one thing I wanted to talk to Lisa about, following up on, how do we frame those connections that we're making in community? There's a whole body of like literature, starting with the book Bowling Alone, that talks about the erosion of community spaces. So framing the solution could be starting with framing the problem. And the problem is we've really lost access to these places where people could meet and do meaningful things together. I mean, now we're at Starbucks, right? Instead of the public park, public parks and libraries are kind of the few spaces, but people aren't interacting generally in those spaces. So thinking about framing the solution to what is acknowledged as a problem. And, it's widely discussed also in America that we're lacking unity right now. Everyone's calling for unity. We're very politically divided. And this is a way to bring people together, in a space where they interact. So I just wanted to throw the problem out there as we have the solution.
Thanks, Kathy. And thank you everybody for coming and sharing and talking today. We have a closing question, and I'm sure Kathy has a couple of announcements before we let you all go. So I'm going to transition us. But this conversation does not end here. We are hoping really to continue it. And I think that's what our closing question kind of is. So, so I'm going to give it to Kara.
Yeah, precisely. The question is, how do folks want to continue this conversation prior to and including at the symposium? And what would be supportive to us as a network? One thought that we had in terms of the symposium might be having some workshopping space to not just continue the conversation, but maybe there are like some specific, I don't know what sort of activities we could give ourselves, but like a way to really workshop some of our language or metrics or frames or storytelling, or practice some storytelling, or review some of the sources we have, and like develop strategies together. And how could we be sharing the story in different ways? Yeah, sky's the limit. So curious to hear from you all. How should we continue this conversation?
Well, great timing. We're putting together the agenda as we speak, so we can definitely create some space. I say definitely, Sean's on the call here too. We can definitely look into creating that space for workshopping. Oh, Sean says definitely. Thanks, Sean.
From what Laura was sharing, I have this idea of like a question simmering of like, how can we be raising up the voices of the folks whose stories we want to amplify, not just be repeating them. Like, we have your testimonials, your quotes, our observations, and now we're spouting that back out. And how can we do that in ways that line up with like our organizational capacity and skills in technology and whatever else? So I'd be really curious to explore that as a conversation. And if there's someone who has knowledge and ability to like lead us through that, that would be amazing. I do not, but I would love to participate in that, and would be happy to just like thought partner with someone on what a workshop about that could look like.
Someone mentioned podcasting in the chat, and that wasn't really discussed today. We didn't have time for it. But I've just started one of my experiments with podcasting. And my first experience was stunning. The impact of a podcast, which I had generated with AI, was stunning to the people that I sent it to. They were overwhelmed with such a positive response. The communicative capability of heartfelt, meaningful podcasting seems to be very powerful. So that might be something to think about exploring, like how to do it, where to do it, how to build upon it. Because you were talking about writing testimonials and all that, but podcasting would be speaking, real people, real voices, real situations, real people on the ground at the very basic community level. I think there's a lot of power in building on podcasting for Gleaners and what you all do.
Betsy in the chat wrote a Google spreadsheet where folks can write down their ideas. I'm going to back us up a little bit. Is this a conversation we want to continue? Kathy's got a thumbs up.
Yep.
Sarah's got a thumbs up. I got some head nods. Okay. So just double checking. And is more discussion what we want? Or is there another way that we, is it maybe as simple as a spreadsheet where we're just dropping in ideas? I don't want anybody to feel like overwhelmed or like, oh gosh, one more thing. Like I want this to be something that we're interested in active, participation.
Maybe we let it percolate and see if somebody wants to do another coffee chat without coffee.
I would like
Think
to just
about
see
it.
a shared spreadsheet just to kind of dump ideas into and have a central
Okay.
place to keep it going in the meantime.
Amelia just asked me, there's no way to, it's so hard during the year to communicate with each other. And I said, that's my board responsibility. And I haven't gotten the Ago WhatsApp chat off the ground. I just quickly added her to the Ago chat. If you want to be added to the Ago chat, the people that are in this coffee chat, the Ago WhatsApp chats, you can put your phone numbers in the chat. Oh my God, how many times can I say chat in one sentence? Or email it to me and I'll put my email there. I need your telephone numbers and you need to be part of WhatsApp.
Yeah, you need to download WhatsApp.
I can't spell my last name. Okay, sorry.
Thomas, I'll reach out about podcasts. I did start one a couple of years ago and then it was like overwhelming to like continue with. I interviewed Sean. Thank you, Sean. And I interviewed a climate specialist as well. And then I was like, this is a lot of work, but I'm happy, especially if that's something people are interested in, I'm happy to reach out and chat about that more.
Yeah, I'm envisioning something a lot more simple to start with. I'm imagining using AI, robot voices.
Yep.
And then using you guys
Fascinated.
to provide your personal content that has so much meaning to you. And I'll play around with feeding it into an AI system and then send the results back to you just to listen to and go see if you like it.
We do
Yeah,
have
I want to talk more.
We have a
Go ahead, Kat.
proposal for a session at the symposium on just that, Tom. So we've got someone who proposed to speak on using AI. So if you guys are interested in that, we've already got a proposal.
So we have
Using AI for what?
Podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the podcast.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
it. Yeah.
We have a couple minutes left and I'm just going to review. So we have some action items. The first one is to think about how you may want to continue this conversation and in what capacity it works for you in a way that you can actively participate. Kara and I can talk about setting up that spreadsheet. That seems like a really straightforward way to just kind of continue this thread. Also, I've been tracking some resources that were mentioned. Laura's email, if you're okay with me sharing that, Laura. Thank you. Also her website and then the book that Kathy mentioned, Bowling Alone. So I'm going to send those to Kathy and then she'll send it out, if you don't mind, Kathy, as a wrap up to the chat. Share the spreadsheet with you. Yes, we will share the spreadsheet with everybody. Maybe we'll make that and then send it to Kathy, who can get it out to everybody today. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for your active listening and participation. This conversation really means a lot. I'll speak for myself, but I feel like it means a lot to Kara too, since we're co-hosting together. But just means a lot, and to have you all show up and to sort of, I don't know, really like solidify that, like that it's important to you all too. That just thank you for sharing your time with us. So I will pass it back to Kathy for our quick closing. And I hope you have a best rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Kara, for presenting today. Great conversation. I'll cycle back with you about space that we can create in the Coffee Chat calendar to move this forward. And thanks for sending me things that I can include in the wrap up. So you've heard the opportunity to come and present. January 31st is the cutoff for us accepting the proposals for the symposium. So if this sparks something you'd like to share with others, I will work with Sean to look at the calendar for that workshop space. We hope to see you in Providence in April 30th to May 2nd. And I agree with Betsy. Thank you for facilitating such a good conversation.
Thanks everyone for coming. Nice to see you all. Looking forward to seeing you at Symposium.
Thank you. See you.
Kara and Kathy, can you stay on and